In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. Another lecture on the introduction to the understanding of the Quran is presented to you. The sequence is such that we are presenting the introduction to the Quran in the form of small questions, and then their answers, so that through these questions and answers, we can gain an introduction to the Quran. This is because having knowledge of the introduction to the Quran is extremely important for understanding the Quran. So, let's take today's lecture. Questions. Today's lecture questions are: what is the fundamental difference between the Quran and an ordinary book? And what is the nature of the Quran's revelation and the manner of its chronological order? It is a very important lecture. It requires your special attention. It is commonly thought that when we hear the Quran as the Book of Allah, a notion associated with an ordinary book passes through our minds, that the Quran is just a book on religion like any other. There is no doubt that the Quran is a book, but the truth is that this book is completely different from other books. Now, what is the reality of this difference? Let's understand this reality, but first, we need to comprehend the difference between the Quran as a book and an ordinary book. To understand this difference, we will first discuss an ordinary book and then talk about the Quran as a book, so that it becomes easier to understand the matter. Consider that we know an ordinary book in terms of a written book. In a written book, we first get information about the author or writer, along with the title and the subject on which the book is written. We can see all the information about it in an instant. We come to know specific types of information in the form of chapters, the title of the book, its compositional arrangement, headings, and style. Make us understand at a glance the nature of the book's writing style. These books can be for various purposes, such as textbooks, recreational books like novels, stories, and tales, or books based on training purposes within the different angles and circles of human life. And the style of expression of all these books is usually written. Now, we attempt to understand the Quran as a book. For this purpose, completely separate from your minds, the concept of an ordinary book that I have just presented to you. And if you have emptied your mind of the concept of a book, then let us examine how the Quran is indeed a book, but of what nature, and how is this book different from other books? The first thing you need to understand is that an ordinary book takes the form of a written book, whereas the Quran, as a book, is an oral book. If I were to present this in another way, it would be that the Quran is a collection of speeches that were revealed by Allah to the Prophet according to the time, place, and necessity. Understand that the Quran is not a book of the nature that Allah wrote it all at once and handed it over to the Prophet with the instruction to have it printed and invite people to it. Rather, it is a book upon which a formal movement was initiated, and the leader of this movement is the blessed person of the Prophet. Allah appointed him as the last prophet in Mecca. He was honored with prophethood, and the series of revelations began. With his prophethood, the Prophet was instructed to start his mission and work from his city, Mecca, and his tribe, the Quraysh. As the time of prophethood progressed, only those instructions were given that were needed. This was the initial period of prophethood, which lasted in Mecca for approximately 4 to 5 years. Now, what were the needs and instructions during this period, in relation to which the revelation of this book, the Quran, took place? Let us look into this, so that we can understand the sequential revelation of the Quran, considering it as a book. During the initial years of the Prophet's prophethood, the need for the revelation of the Quran and its arrangement occurred in such a way. Number 1. During the early days of prophethood, through the revelation of the Quran, the Prophet, peace be upon him, was informed about how to prepare himself for this great movement and what the history of his mission should be. Number 2. Through the revelation of the Quran, the truth about Allah Almighty and monotheism was conveyed, and a comprehensive refutation was made of those false beliefs and misconceptions that people had fabricated over centuries of decline or degeneration. It was on the basis of these false beliefs that people had turned the earth into a haven of oppression. Number 3. From the beginning of the Islamic movement, there was an invitation towards the correct human behavior, which is solely the servitude to the Lord, as required by Him. Alongside this, the moral principles were outlined, by following which a person can achieve success and prosperity. I hope that the contents of the Quran in its book form will help you. You will be understanding, or you may have already understood, that initially all the messages of the Quran that were revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, were in small and concise forms. The hidden message within them had a profound impact and was perfectly aligned with the temperament of the addressed nation, based on the best style, and had a tremendous effect on human hearts. It had the quality of influencing and captivating the people of the addressed nation at that time, namely the tribe of Quraysh, and was filled with the ability to capture their attention. In this initial period of the Quran's revelation, although truths were being conveyed, these truths were heavily imbued with the local color of that time, to make them understandable to the addressed nation, to instill these truths in the mind. If the early messages of the Quran required arguments, evidence, and examples, all these were drawn from the same place and context that the local people of that time knew and recognized very well. The history of those people, their traditions, the daily observations they encountered, and the signs that passed before their eyes were described. Their beliefs and moral conditions, as well as the reflection of their collective temperament, were presented in such a manner that they could easily understand and listen to it, so that they could easily hear, understand, and see it. This was the need for the revelation of the Quran at that time, which we can refer to as the initial state of the chronological order. In this way, the Islamic movement began its journey towards its logical conclusion, and over time, whenever and however this movement was in need of guidance for the rise of the movement, the Quran was revealed to the Prophet in a discursive manner according to these needs. The style of these addresses was sometimes of powerful oratory, sometimes adorned with regal decrees and commands, and at other times filled with instructional, teaching and education, and then sometimes included a tone of armed understanding. At that time, the main purpose of all these instructions and speeches was to ensure that the journey from individuals to a community, from a community to a state, and from a state to governance was a continuous one, steadily reaching its destinations. The instructions required in this context were about what principles and regulations should be in various aspects of life, how life should be lived, and how the worship of the Lord should be organized, what should be the nature of relations with the people of the book, how to honor agreements with warring enemies and nations with whom treaties have been formed, what should be the need and nature of orders regarding conduct with nations, and then the duties of the organized group of believers that were structured. The series of instructions regarding the fulfillment of duties was also made a part of the revelation of the Quran. Similarly, these discourses included commands related to the education and training of Muslims. Under the leadership of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, this journey was completed over a period of 23 years. Thus, the journey of the revelation of the Quran spanned from the beginning of prophethood to the attainment of its goal, covering a period of 23 years. The process of the revelation of the Quran continued, and thus the style of this book was never written, but rather the style of the Quran was that of oratory. Moreover, this oratory was not like the lectures of a professor, but rather consisted of sermons of a preacher, which on one hand was full of the ability to appeal simultaneously to the heart and mind, intellect and emotions, whose manner of address was capable of embedding its message in hearts from every possible angle, changing the world of thoughts, stirring a flood of emotions in an astonishing manner. and breaking the force of opposition. While on the other hand, this same manner of address was rich in reform and training for its companions, instilling in them a state of enthusiasm and determination, and was complete with the effect of turning enemies into friends, and skeptics into acknowledgers. Wherever the Islamic movement required, it was through this manner of address that the arguments of opponents were cut off by the Quran. We can say this, that for a proponent of a mission, a leader of a movement, wherever and in whatever manner guidance was needed to achieve the goal, the revelation of the Quran continued to fulfill this need in the same manner. Thus, when the Islamic movement achieved its goal, the process of the Quran's revelation was also completed, which was later compiled into book form. Here, a question arises in our minds about how the Quran was then arranged. To address this, I would say that this arrangement was later given by the command of Allah. We will certainly provide a separate lecture on this in the series of introductory lectures on the Quran. Surely, you must have understood the difference between the Holy Quran and an ordinary book, and what the style of the Quran's revelation order is like. Alhamdulillah, today's lecture is complete, and in the next lecture, we will discuss further regarding the introduction to the Quran. I invite you from this platform to come towards understanding the Holy Quran. This is the word of Allah Almighty, revealed according to human nature, and this book is very easy. To understand the Holy Quran, we have started an excellent series on Quran comprehension. Imagine, can just a single verse, a simple click, change someone's life forever with the light of the Quran? There is someone out there, searching for peace, guidance, and answers, and you can be the reason they find what they are looking for. My mission is very simple, to spread the knowledge of the Holy Quran to every corner of the world. But I cannot accomplish this task alone. I need your help. If this message touches your heart, if you believe in sharing the light of the Quran, then please like, subscribe, and share this video. In this way, together we can reach those who need it the most. I invite you once again to come and understand the Holy Quran through these small lectures. See you in the next lecture. Take great care of yourself. After Allah's will, peace and blessings be upon you.